And the HD of it really is just kind of bringing it to 69 aspect ratio and making it, maybe 1080p if you're lucky 4K. And then you've HDified it, but it's the actual original game. So that it would be great if there was like some sort of actual definition that was put down by industry professionals and saying that if you make it in a certain way, you are classifiable as a certain thing there. But yeah.
Demetrius, in your experience, just as a fan or as even as part of your brand, have you ever come across any brands that really, to use the term, remake a game's legacy or its longevity, kind of transform it from maybe something that was either unplayable or maybe even take it to a new level that it wasn't as its initial incarnation?
Yeah, I mean, Night Dive, my good friends at Night Dive, I think they're some of the very best in that area, right? I mean, look at the games that they've gone back and remastered, over the years. A lot of them are from the old N64 days. And look, N64, I love the N64. It's one of my favorite consoles. I think it's up there with one of my favorite Nintendo consoles, right? But if you go back and play any of those games, especially the FPS style games like the Turoks, the Shadowmans,
yeah,
all of them run at like 12 frames per second, and they look absolutely blurry, and just it's very difficult to sit down and play certain N64 games, in modern times, because you're just not going to have a great experience with it. So Night Dive, I mean, they do incredible work enhancing these games. And the way that I think about when I play a Night Dive game is the way that it should feel like to me in 2025, right? So if I fire up Turok 3 or Shadowman, the way that it plays on my PC is exactly the way that I think about in my head. So I think for me, that's the kind of studio that does incredible type of work with regards to those types of things. Not only do they just bring them forward, but you mentioned modding, they also add new features, yeah. Right? So when we did Quake, we brought in the N64 version as well, which was incredible because at the time I remember I thought, well, we were doing Quake, this is going to be awesome. And then Kaiser, Sam, the lead Kex programmer, suggested that, hey, we could probably bring in the N64 episodes as well. I was like, that's incredible. So there's always, if there is an ability and a way to bring in the extras or additions to that experience to kind of make it an overall total package, it's incredible. And the other thing that we did when we did Quake, and I know Quake 2 has it as well, we did add a modding section to the game as well, where certain mods can be downloaded and run. And I think Bethesda was the one that kind of set that up for us at the time. But it was great because not only are you, bringing Quake to consoles for the very first time since the days of the N64 and the PlayStation, you're giving fans of the game, everyone that loves Quake, whether you're just a casual Quake player that kind of remembers playing a couple of, deathmatch rounds back in the day, or if you're someone that makes Quake levels and you're really hardcore into the modding side, or if you're just someone that, wants to play one of the most legendary FPSs ever made for the very first time, all that is available to you, right? So that's what I love about, what those guys do. They don't just remaster the game. If there is a way to bring in more, and usually they do, then, they do it. So yeah, I think it's really awesome.
Yeah, I think the majority of their games, whenever they release them, they don't just feel like game releases, they feel like they're releasing almost a collector's edition.
Exactly, yeah.
Because it's such an, everything all together, even stuff that, like you said, with Quake 64, which when I played it, I was very surprised by how different it was, especially in its color palette.
Very different in color palette. Even the music in the game is different.
Yeah.
There's just so many differences. Aubrey, yeah. But yeah, it's great. And if you look at most of their releases, they will do similar things. Look, I mean, the Doom 1 and 2, thing that they did last year. I mean, that was just packed full of stuff.
Yeah, it was. Glad to see that Sigil 2 is finally on there now as well, though. Because it's such a shame that it wasn't able to be put on the first one. I do wonder if, with it now being put on there, just to kind of deviate for a second, does that kind of solidify it as being canon? Now that it's part of an official sort of, Night Dive release, putting everything together. But
that's a good question.
Yeah, maybe
I
one day.
Maybe we could find out. Oh, I can ask, see what they say.
Question the tenets of a religion here or something.
I know, it's because it's John Romero, so you kind of automatically assume that yes, it's canon because it's the guy that made it, or part of the team that made it in the first place.
Yeah.
But then when you obviously consider selling the company and then the IP brand and stuff, that actually the original people that made the game don't have any call, in shots in terms of modding in general. The people that made the game originally are not the people that are actually keeping it going right now. What was the first game you ever got involved with in terms of emulation?
Emulation probably would have been something on, I would say, the NES back in those days. So the original emulators that came out in the 90s was when PCs were starting to get fast enough to actually emulate hardware. So I remember back in the day, I had a 486 PC, and it was I think it was a 66 megahertz. So it ran Doom really well, but didn't run Quake at all because it didn't have floating point. But I remember downloading emulators at the time, like if you remember Nesticle, have you heard of that one? It's kind of the very popular NES emulator, and it's a play on another word. But it was developed by Isa Addis, who is someone that's an absolute genius emulation developer. I believe he went on to work at Ubisoft and did the Fight Night round. Sorry, not Ubisoft. He worked at EA and did the Fight Night round 1 and 2 games, and he's been in the industry for very many years. But he got his start as an emulation developer. So he wrote this NES emulator in assembly language that ran at full speed on like a 486. And at the time, again, I was playing games on my PC back in the day, and then someone at college sent me an emulator that was called Nesticle and said, "Check this out." And I ran it, and I was playing Super Mario 2 and 3. Super Mario 2 and 3 on my PC, and I was playing Metroid and Zelda, and I was like, "This is incredible! Like, how is this even possible?" So
yeah,
NES was the first memories I had, and then just kind of went from there.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people of our generation, the NES would have been naturally, of course, before the NES, the entire industry caved in, didn't it? All thanks to, I mean, everyone blames ET, but come on, it's not ET. It was just the abundance of what was there. It just caved in.
Well, it's you bring up a good point, because I know in North America there was a video game crash, right? And at the time, I lived in Australia, and you said you're based in the UK. There was no crash in the UK and Europe during that time. Like, from what I remember, and maybe you have a take on it as well, but from what I remember, back in those days, it was kind of the British bedroom coder, the emergence of that, where you got guys like Jeff Minter and Matthew Smith that making games like Jet Set Willy, and you've got Ultimate Play the Game. Those guys are doing like Night Law, and who ended up becoming Rare later on.